could you please sing the opening to I Want It That Way?
Really? Okay.
You are
my
fire.
Number 2, keep it going.
The one
I
desire.
Number 3,
Believe
when I say
number 4,
I want it that way.
tell me why.
Ain't nothing but a heartache. Tell me why. Ain't nothing but a mistake.
I never
Wanna hear you say I want it that way.
Oh, shit. Number 1, could you please sing?
Okay, guys, that was kind of goofy, but yeah. If you read the thing, if you read the actual title, you know what I'm talking about today, and it's a Minecraft lore. You guys never listened to my series, and I'm kind of mad about that. I never hear you ever. I never hear somebody. Okay, good. Guys, you know the sniffer? This thing. This cute little thing. If I tell you what it's been through, you're going to cry. And feel so bad for it. And yes, I am talking about it literally before 1.20 is ever gonna release it. Also, if this ever lived in the Nether, that explains the giant bones, but I'm not saying that today, at least if I find any clues of that. So, guys, you know where you find this thing? Where do you find the Where do you find this?
How to get sniffer eggs in
How do
Minecraft.
you get the
sniffer is a new mob in the 1.20
Okay, we know how to get it. I just don't remember where it is, and there's two types of deserts. So
and the pitcher pods. But first you will have to get a sniffer egg and hatch them. The sniffer is only in the sniffer egg. There's only one location to find the sniffer egg, and that is in the suspicious sand in the Warm Ocean Ruins. Warm Ocean Ruins are found in warm, lukewarm oceans along with
it can only be found.
their deep variants. The warm oceans will be next to biomes like deserts, savannas, and badlands. The lukewarm will be next to jungles.
It does show the desert, so there's a little bit more like kind of mist, I guess. So it can appear in that desert. My theory is that they lived with the ancient Husk people. Don't know where. Meaning that, also this does help a part of my theory, that you can find them down in the sea, meaning that at one point, the desert people traded the sniffers. And those desert that you see
How to get
in the
sniffer
vid.
eggs in Minecraft. Sniffer egg. There's only one location to find the
Can only
sniffer
be
egg,
found in
and that is
suspicious
in the suspicious sand in the Warm Ocean Ruins. Warm Ocean Ruins are found in warm, lukewarm oceans, along with their deep variants. The warm oceans will be next to biomes like deserts, savannas, and badlands.
It shows
the lukewarm will be
this
next to
and
jungles
this
and
stuff.
savannas. If you're having a hard time identifying the type of ocean, the best way is by looking at the water. Lukewarm oceans will have a light blue water color, and warm oceans will have an aquamarine color. Plus, the warm oceans are the only biome with coral reefs in them. The warm ocean ruin will be composed of cut sandstone, and light blue terracotta, with suspicious sand intermixed with sand at the base. The ocean ruins can be a single hut or a grouping of huts. The warm ocean ruins are
I
meant to
think
be like
that's
a
like you
village
can only
for the
find from
drowned.
here.
1 to
If
2
you
drowned will spawn
if you
per
guys
building.
let me know
Sometimes
if
it can
I'm
be
wrong.
3 or 4.
My
The drowned
theory,
will
if you
spawn
can
when
find
the
them in those
ocean ruins
deserts,
are
that they
generated.
lived
Once
with
they
the
are cleared
husks.
out, they are less likely to spawn, as
And
the
I don't
drowned
mean the
spawn will
husks
be
now,
based
I
on it
mean
being
the
in
ancient
the ocean, which is
builders.
a lower
They
spawn rate
found
for
them
the
one day
drowned.
in
The
deep in the
drowned should be
sand.
easy to deal with unless they have a trident.
Also, they
If
are
you're having
water
difficulty
things,
finding the warm
meaning
ocean
that
ruin, you can use
literally
the command /locate structure ocean_ruin_war. This will give you the coordinates to the nearest warm ocean ruin. Also, if you go to the site
are used to
chunkbase.com,
heat,
which has a locator for the
like
ocean
the desert,
ruins, just put
and
in
they
the
have been
seed and the version of the
trained,
game you are playing.
trained.
This will give you the coordinates for the
They are
ocean
used to
ruins, the
warm
type
climates.
of ocean ruin, either warm or cold, and the size of the ocean ruins. The suspicious sand will look slightly
They
different
used to
than a normal
live
sand block and can be
in the
hard to see the
desert,
difference. With suspicious sand, you will have
but
to be
now
careful,
this
as it
kind
will
of
break
changes
if
my
it is
theory a little
mined, a
bit.
silk touch tool is used to mine it, or the block
My theory was
underneath is
originally
removed.
that they
You'll have
lived
to
with
use
the
the brush
ancient
tool to brush the block
desert
using right click
people,
or
but
holding the use
now
button.
it
This
actually
will
paints
cause
a
an
more
item to
tragic
slowly
tale
emerge
for
from the
them.
suspicious sand and turn it into a normal
'Cause
sand block. From playing around in the
meaning
snapshot,
that they
there
did
seems to be
explore.
around 1 to 4 suspicious sand blocks per a hut. You probably want to find a larger warm ocean ruins with lots of huts, as you'll have a greater chance
So some of them
finding
explored
more
outside
suspicious
of it.
blocks and to find
Also,
a
this
sniffer
does
egg.
reveal
There's a
backstory to the Husk.
6.7%
So it will
chance to
be
get a sniffer
Sniffer
egg
plus
from
Husk
excavating the
lore
suspicious sand
drop
block. On average, it'll take about 16
thing.
times to get one
So
sniffer
in
egg.
this,
The
they
other way to get sniffer
literally
eggs is once you have 2 sniffers. If you feed them torchflower seeds, which they dig up,
they
will
did
enter love mode and
they
breed.
did
This
live
will
with
cause a sniffer
desert
egg to drop
people
as an item.
before. My theory is that they lived with desert people, but now I see that they took them in the waters. Also meaning that originally the desert people actually lived in trenches. Some of them at least did. Well, but meaning some of the desert people lived in the trenches of the desert, kind of changing my theory. So it actually does expose, because the drown. So meaning it didn't only flood where ancient monuments were; it flooded canyons too, killing some of the desert people that lived in those trenches that used sniffer eggs to, help them find resources. Because desert people didn't really have any resources like the other ancient builders. They were suffering. You can tell because they do have money and stuff, but they don't really have any other plans, meaning that they used a sniffer as a hope. And these versions of the desert people, the desert ancient people, that lived in trenches that were very small communities of the larger desert people in the big cut clay desert parts where you can't find any gardens, meaning that they were down there to breed sniffers. They probably didn't have a lot of water in there, but they did try to give a sniffer a good climate, at least tried to. So they would start hatching, helping them find resources, but it was too late. When the place, the world flooding, why the trenches are filled with water and somehow there are people still in them that used to try to help the now dead people of the other deserts with clay. We're trying to help them because their resources were small. They didn't really have any resources. They were dying. They needed the sniffer to help them find resources, but it was too late. Yeah, because that it is desert people because they do still live in the desert, but they're trying to help because they found a sniffer that specifically its job is to sniff at plants, and that the desert people actually did have pottery and stuff that they were using because you can see them buried in the sand, and they were still a part of it. You know how you see the igloos and they're exploring to find a cure for the zombie virus? These guys were doing something for food. They were trying to find resources because if you see normal deserts beside villages, they don't have any resources at all. Meaning that most of the desert land that some of the ancient builders lived in, they were dying because they didn't have anything. So Sniffer was their last hope, but flooded. The canyons flooded, killing the explorers that tried to at least trade for food, trying to keep their people alive, but eventually the normal desert people ran out of water, ran out of food, and dried and died. But the sniffer buried its egg, trying to keep its species from dying, knowing that they would still live for thousands of millions of years. And yeah, because I don't think that they buried them, because why would they bury the sniffer eggs? But sniffers are very good at digging. The only reason I think they are good at digging is for two reasons. One, they were trained, some of them were trained to do that, and also they need to, so they can breed and have their eggs in the ground for a little bit to keep it alive. And realizing that they were also part plant. They were part plant. Keeping their eggs in the ground like seeds until one day they were brought to the top. Knowing that the heat would make it hatch because it's the right temperature. That's why it's in heated places, because they usually lived in hot climates like deserts. But they were water creatures because also they were being traded to ancient people that were lived in in watery areas that were being flooded. But the desert people did die. Some died from the flood that, killed the monument people, but also killed some of the desert people that actually were getting resources, that were trading, because, you could find emeralds that is the sand, and why there's a small amount of them, because they were trying to get stuff to trade so they could bring food back to their thing, because the only thing you find in those deserts are wood, like stick branches, tumbleweed. You never find a cactus, at least. No. Meaning that the lands, wouldn't help them grow food. Meaning that some of them died from the floods that happened, that drowned the monuments and also flooded the canyons, killing some of them that were trying to help. Because one thing that villagers trade with emeralds. And what do villagers have? Food. And what sniffers sniff out are plants so they can find plants and help feed their whole communities in different regions, but it was too late. Before they could ever help them out more and more, they died from the flood, and that's why there's water in there. They don't hatch in water, they just can live in it. You need dry land, that's why it only hatches on land, and why they had a dry desert canyon to be specifically. Because they knew it was a perfect enough conditions to hatch the sniffers, to help them find resources, for the husks that, died from dehydration and stuff. And there's no food, no chests. Meaning that they were the first, well, at least the first-ish, to start dying before the wither could even be made. Meaning that they were like the first to be. And yeah, that's why it's good at sniffing plants, because it helps it find plants to eat because it's a herbivore. And two, the only reason why the desert people wanted them is to get food. Like, not meat, plants, because they probably did have pig, but they couldn't feed them because there was no life in the desert. So, yeah, there's no plants in any desert biome except the villages, meaning that they were dying because of that. And I'm not talking about the people that live in the temples. I mean people that weren't living in the temples. Were, the ones that were really suffering. And yeah, they all died from dehydration because there's nothing left. The people that were supposed to help them by, trading with the emeralds that they had, because no other places have emeralds except villages. And the only reason why these have emeralds are probably to trade. So they did die. And yeah, the sniffers dig because they bury their eggs to survive. The sniffers, knowing that they might go extinct, buried their eggs so they would live. And the desert people died first, drying to death. Some got the first ones that get killed were the explorers that really tried to explore. That's why they live in a different desert biome than the normal husks live, because they explored in there to find villagers to trade to bring food back. But they died before they could. That's why they were collecting emeralds. Because there's no other place that really has emeralds except ancient places, because they can be used to trade. And sniffers help find plants. Well, ancient plants, but plants, and they were trying to use that. And it's weird, the sniffers do live on because they saw the end, buried their egg. They buried their eggs, and one by one, they started dying. Without people to really take care of them, and the wither also being loose killed them one by one. The wither didn't know that there was eggs still in the sand, trying to go after, the ancient builders, trying to kill them. As a sniffer and the desert people were just trying to survive. And the desert people actually did have stuff. You'd also find, pottery and music and sand and stuff. They're not connected to the ancient city people, but they are connected to the weird desert people that tried to make their civilization live, but they died. Because the mud kept absorbing the water. There was barely any water. And the plague turned them into the first zombies, the Husk. Well, not the first. The second zombies, the Husk. And you could tell they were kind of poor because they were ripped and dry. Their body, there's a husk because they were dry, meaning that they didn't die from like old age or anything or starvation. Specifically, they died because they didn't have any water. So yeah, that's the sad tale of them. And also another reason why I think is because they only are allowed or buried specifically in the sand, specifically in those areas, meaning that they were breeding there. Most of them were breeding there because of the desert people. And the husks are dry, dead, dirty, meaning they didn't have any water to clean themselves or drink or anything to grow any food, so they died from thirst before they could ever die from starvation. So yeah, that is the sad tale of the desert people because they didn't have anything, and the sniffer and why it exists. Because it's a plant that lives on because and it wasn't created, it was found. I do believe that it has like a soul because one thing I do believe that it was kind of made because look at the texture. It looks like something from the nether. Meaning the nether people accidentally made it by souls. But instead of like the wither, it was an evil. Another cave. It was made with the souls to make a plant to life. That's why it looks like grassy because it's a plant because it was a plant, but it was given life by souls. Maybe some off-wrong experiment that happened. They wanted to help. And that's why they trust you, because they look at you as one of the ancient builders. They help the ancient people that lived in the desert specifically to try to help them find stuff to eat or even drink. So, yeah. So, plants were given life by souls. And it turned into its own species. Related to the plants, probably from the nether. It still tried to help because it cares. Because one thing that's weird, the texture is plant and mossy, like it's like nether wart. So it was made by some plant from the nether that somehow got into the real world from like the ruined portals. So they were originally going to build them and escape. So it could be when they were trying to flee that these things were created, but no. I feel like they were created from the nether wart, from the villagers finding plants that were all mossy because it has a plant on its back, meaning that it was a plant that was infused with souls. And made this. Meaning it was created not by the desert people because they never created anything, but it was created with souls probably on plant. Probably an Illager experiment that went wrong. And yeah, that's my theory. See, guys, if you agree with me, leave a like, subscribe, comment down the video below. Please hit that bell because it helps you watch more stuff like this, please. And yeah, I will see you next time.